How's it going, everyone? Today I want to show how to install Windows 11 build 24H2 from start to finish. Plus I'll show some tips and tricks that in my mind optimize the experience. To start, Windows 11 build 24H2 officially came out in the last 24 hours of October 1st, 2024. This build should be the latest and greatest for the next year until at least October of 2025, which is right about when Windows 10 will be officially end of life unless you're willing to pay Microsoft for the extended security updates for a few more years. Love it or hate it, Windows 11 is the latest and greatest version of Windows, and hopefully this video will show some people how to optimize it to be as Windows 10-like as possible. Before I begin, one thing just to mention is that all the websites that I do show in the video I will have links for in the description below, and I will also have a USB drive recommendation. If you don't already have an 8GB or larger USB thumb drive, then I will have a link in the description below to help you out with that portion. So to begin, on Microsoft's website, which is the Media Creation Tool website, you have a few options here to download Windows 11. Now, one thing just to mention is that if you are running on Windows 10, for instance, you can actually select this option here to download now, and you would just click through the options that pop up to do an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. My recommendation for users with Windows 10 jumping to Windows 11 at this point is just to do a fresh install, just so that everything is nice and clean and fresh. So if we scroll down on this page, there's the option to create Windows 11 installation media, and then there's also the option to download the disk image or ISO image, which you can do here by just selecting the edition and then clicking download now. And then you could use something like Rufus to create the bootable thumb drive, which you may have noticed in my previous operating system videos that I use a lot. However, for today's video, I'm actually going to use the Microsoft installation media portion here using the media creation tool. So let's click on download now under create Windows 11 installation media, and then I'm just going to open the file. I'll hit yes for the UAC prompt. That's going to say getting a few things ready, and then accept the agreement, and then it's going to say getting a few things ready again. Just be patient as this crunches. This is going to be dependent on your internet speed as well as how fast your computer actually is. I'm going to leave everything as is. We're going to leave it as use the recommended options for this PC. We will click on next. And then once again, it does give you an option to download the ISO file. However, we're going to leave it as the USB flash drive method. So just as it mentions here, it needs to be at least an 8GB drive or larger. And before you hit next here, make sure you have your USB thumb drive plugged in and ready to go. So I have my USB thumb drive plugged in, so I will continue the process. We will click next, and then if all goes well, it should hopefully see your USB thumb drive. If it doesn't, you can click refresh drive list, and if it still doesn't show up, I'd recommend just rebooting your computer with the USB thumb drive in and trying this process again. So we'll click next, and it's going to say getting a few things ready. Let's just be patient here. It could take some time, and you will see the progress increasing here. And now it's creating the Windows 11 media. Alright, if all is well, then it should say your USB flash drive is ready. We can click on finish, and it's going to say it's doing a quick cleanup here. Just give it some time. And now we can close out of Edge. So the biggest difficulty is going to be getting the machine to actually boot from the thumb drive. Unfortunately, every manufacturer and model for that manufacturer is different with how they allow you to boot from thumb drives. Some machines it's the F2 key, F4, F5, F6, it can be F8, F10, F12, the delete key. If it's a Microsoft Surface, then you have to hold the power button and the volume up or volume down button at the same exact time for it to boot from a thumb drive. So my recommendation is to Google your exact model machine, and that should lead you down the right path of figuring out how to get a thumb drive to actually boot on your machine. In my case, I'm using a Lenovo desktop, which uses the F12 key. Not all Lenovos are the same, but for mine, the F12 key is how I can boot onto the thumb drive. So I'm going to reboot, and then I will start mashing the F12 key. And I'll start mashing it right now. Now, of course, every boot menu is going to be different. For mine, it's pretty basic, but I'm going to use the down arrow key to select the USB hard disk drive here from my Samsung flash drive. I'll hit enter, and then it should hopefully boot off of it. We'll give it a moment, and I see the Windows 11 little twirly icon there, so that's a good sign. And of course, depending on the speed of your thumb drive is going to be how long it actually takes for the setup process to actually appear here for you. I'm going to click next for this, but obviously you can feel free to change up your time and currency format and your language to install options. Click next. Select keyboard settings. I'm going to leave mine as US, but of course you can change up yours to whatever you need to here. I will click next. And at this point, I'm going to leave it as install Windows 11, and then I'm going to check that I agree everything will be deleted, including my files, apps, and settings. Like I said, because what I'm showing is a complete fresh install of Windows 11, everything is going to get nuked. So if you're at this point and you realize that you did not back up your data, then go ahead and click the X up here, and then it should reboot the machine, back up whatever data you need, and then continue on down this path here. So I will click on next, and then it's going to say we're getting a few things ready, and then I'll click on accept for the license and terms. And Microsoft did change up this screen here. What's a little confusing is that they do now show your USB thumb drive actually as a partition, which makes this a little confusing, and you have to be careful not to nuke your USB thumb drive in this whole process here. So our main point of focus is going to be disk 0. That's the main hard drive on this machine. And so I'm going to click on delete partition for everything under disk 0 partition. And then I'll just keep going right down the line, and it should slowly start adding everything into an unallocated space. So I'll click on partition 1, delete partition, and then disk 0 partition 1 also, I will delete partition. As you can see, unallocated space is growing in size here. And then disk 0 partition 1 again, delete partition, and now everything is bundled under just disk 0 as having unallocated space. This is how we want it. So with it selected, we don't have to click anything else except for next. It will auto partition it and all that good stuff for us. So I'll click on next. This is just giving us a recap of what is happening. So we're installing Windows 11 Pro, and we are keeping nothing. Now in this case, if your machine has a home license to it, then it would show home here. So this is completely dependent on the license key that's assigned to your machine of what would show up here. So we'll click on install, and then just be patient as it crunches along here. And the machine's going to reboot. Then we're going to see this black installing screen. It's going to mention your computer may restart a few times. Just be patient. If it is a laptop, make sure it is plugged into power during this entire process. And it's rebooting again. So choose your country or origin. I'll leave mine as United States. I'll click yes. Select your keyboard layout or input method. I'm going to leave mine as US. I'll click yes. Want to add a second keyboard layout? You can feel free to add one. I'm going to click skip. It's going to attempt to check for updates. And then you can name your device. I will just go ahead and name mine digital-001. Name it whatever you want, or you can feel free to skip it. I'm going to click on next. It's going to reboot, and then it's going to go back to the setup again. And then I'm going to select setup for personal use. If you're setting up for work or school, you can choose this option here. However, I'm going to use for personal use. Click next. It's going to attempt checking for Windows updates. It is going to come up with the unlock your Microsoft experience. Click on sign in. Now this next step is going to be completely optional. However, if you want to use a local account instead of signing in with a Microsoft account, it is still possible. We just have to do a few little tricks. So if you want to have a local account, feel free to follow along with this next few steps here. If you want to continue to use a Microsoft account, then just type in your credentials here. Click next, it'll ask you for a password. For your Microsoft account, click next again, and then there may be some screens that ask you just what you want to have show up on your machine and whatnot. So anyhow, for the bypass, which will make it so that we can actually create a local account on 24H2, hold down the Shift key and hit F10, and then type in ncpa.cpl and hit enter. And then it's going to pop up with your network connection options here. Now, depending on if you have a laptop which is going to have wireless, or you have a desktop that has wireless, then you're going to see a Wi-Fi adapter, and you're most likely going to see a hardwired NIC card here, although not necessarily all machines these days have hardwired connections. Anyhow, the thing that you want to do is just make sure that you select both of these if you have both, and just right click on them and click disable. So I will disable my hardwired network, and then I will disable my wireless network card as well. And then we can just close out of the network interface option there. And then next up, we need to type in OOBE or OOB or out of box experience / bypass NRO and hit enter. And then the machine should reboot. Just be patient and then just wait just a moment here. And then we're going to be met with the general selection screen again here. So once again, select your country or region. I'll leave United States, click yes. Keyboard layout or input method, once again, I'll leave it as US, click yes. If you want to add a secondary keyboard layout, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, click skip again. And then it's going to say, let's connect you to a network. Now it's of course going to say, maybe you should install driver. Don't do that. Click I don't have internet. And then type in a username that you want. I'm just going to type in digital as the user, and I'll click next. And then I recommend you do set a password. For my sake, I'm not going to set a password. Generally speaking, always good to set up a password for security reasons. Click next. And then you're going to have choose privacy settings for your device. This is all optional and what you can toggle on and off here. Feel free to read through these. However, I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to undo the tailored experience, inking and typing. I'm going to select no. Diagnostic data, which is currently set to include optional, is just the required. Telemetry, diagnostic data. Find my device, I don't need that either, so I'm going to select no for that. The only one I'm going to leave on is going to be location, and that's really just for time synchronization. However, if you don't want that either, you can also toggle that off. So I'm going to click accept, and it's going to start building our user's profile. So just be patient here. Might take a few minutes, don't turn off your PC. Almost there. And now we are at the desktop. So if you went ahead and followed along to the local account creation, then we do need to re-enable our network controllers. And so to do so, if the start menu is still showing here, then you can click in here. Otherwise, let's say that the start menu closed, then just click the start menu again, and then type in ncpa.cpl and hit enter. And then that network connections box is going to appear just as we saw in the bypass that we had used. And all we're going to do is just right click on each one and just re-enable them. So just click on enable for both, and that will turn those devices back on. And then we can close out of that, and then we are ready to go. So whether you bypassed the account or you went with a Microsoft account, then everything from here on out is going to be the same. So there's two ways that you can go about kind of moving forward at this point. The decision is going to be, do you want to do Windows updates first, or do you want to download the drivers for your computer? And the drivers, if you're unsure what those are, is the software that Windows needs to know to fully utilize the hardware of your machine. So for instance, the graphics chip on the machine, if you have like a card reader, your sound for the machine, all that good stuff requires drivers to run the best they can. So my recommendation is to open up Edge, because we're going to go down the drivers route. I'm going to click on Start Without Your Data. I'm going to uncheck Bring Over Your Data. Click Confirm and Continue. It's going to ask if you want to sign into Google to continue. I'm going to continue without this data. All this stuff that we're doing, you can always set up after the fact. I'm going to uncheck Make Your Microsoft experience more useful for you. Confirm and start browsing. You can feel free to change the layout here. So for instance, you can set dark mode on, and you can also set a theme. So I'll just click on Moonlight Glow, but feel free to change it however you want. I'll click on Next, and then it's going to give you these options to where you can set a whole bunch of Windows taskbar things. I'm going to leave that as is. We'll click Finish. And then because I have a Lenovo, I'm going to type in lenovo.com. Now, of course, you would go to your manufacturer's website if it's a Lenovo, an HP, an Asus, a Dell. And basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to find their support page. I'm just going to click on it. Once again, every site is going to be different. and then I'm going to click on technical support, and then I'll just hit OK for the cookies there. And I'll scroll down and I'll say view PC support, and then I'll just type in the model. Mine is an M720Q. I'll click on downloads, and then I'll select drivers here. And then my rule of thumb is that I install the chipset driver first, and then if there's an Intel management driver or AMD's equivalent, then I will install that, and then I will install any storage driver, graphics driver, wireless or network driver, and then sound driver, and then if you have like a SD card reader or something like that, any sort of specialty things, touchpad driver, stuff like that, that's kind of one of the last ones I do. So anyhow, I'm going to download the drivers, I'm going to install them, and then I will see you back for the next process. Alright, so with your drivers installed, then my recommendation is to run your Windows updates, and then we can continue on with the process here. So let's go to Start, locate your Settings option, click on that. Let's maximize the page, go over to Windows Update. So it looks like it's already trying to install some updates. One thing I like to do is I like to go down to Advanced Options, and this is completely optional, but I'm going to check Get Updates for other Microsoft products. You can choose the option to get me up to date, which would mean that if you walk away, then it will automatically reboot when the patches are done, and I'll just turn that on. I like to check the download over metered connections just in case for some reason it decides that it's on a metered connection when it's not. And you can also have the option to notify you when updates are done and need to reboot, and I'll just turn that on as well. And then I'll just use the arrow on the top left corner to go back. And then at this point, I'm going to click on retry all, as it's going to query for updates again. And anything that said retry on it was most likely driver related. And since I installed the drivers, while it was probably querying for updates, it's probably going to be happy now. So just be patient as it queries for updates. One other option that you could check is the get latest updates as soon as they're available. It's completely optional to check that, but if you want to be more on the cutting edge for updates, then you could select that. For the sake of this video, I'm going to leave it off. I do see there is this cumulative update preview for Windows 11. Since 24H2 is so new, I am going to click on download and install. It's completely optional if you want to choose that, but this is usually the after Patch Tuesday patch that comes out that's ahead of the next Patch Tuesday. If you're unfamiliar with Patch Tuesday is when Microsoft releases its Windows updates. It's the second Tuesday of every month. So this is more or less what they would consider the out-of-band patches that came out after Patch Tuesday, which are completely optional to take, and it fixes some things that may have come up in the meantime. And then just be patient as it downloads and installs. If you get the prompt, just go ahead and click on Restart Now. Alright, one last thing I want to show just for update-wise stuff is that the Microsoft Store does have updates. Usually it's pretty good about keeping things up to date, but with a fresh build, I like to make sure that things are actually up to date across the board. So down the bottom left-hand corner, click on Library, click on Get Updates, and then just be patient as it crunches through any updates that it needs to pull down. And you'll see a whole bunch of things potentially twirling around as it's all queued up to update, so just let it work its magic here. Come back in like 10 minutes. And then I like to click on it just one more time after it's done, just to make sure that it actually is done. Sometimes there's updates for the updates. Alright, looks like it is done, so we'll just close out of that. So I think one of the big things that annoys a lot of people with Windows 11 is the fact that the start menu is dead center. So let me go through a whole bunch of things of customizing things more to people's liking. Of course, this is all completely optional. But if we go down to the taskbar on the bottom, right click on it, select taskbar settings, we maximize this. So on the first page here, there's a few settings that we could change. For instance, you can change the search to be hidden, you can turn the task view off, you can turn widgets off, or you can keep them on however you want it. Another thing that people will be taking a look at is the taskbar behaviors. So taskbar alignment, if you want it to be more traditional Windows-like, you can change it from center to left. Once again, it's completely optional. There are more settings in here if we scroll down. For instance, combine taskbar buttons and hide labels. You can change this to when taskbar is full or never. So if you want to use that setting, that's how you can change that. In the task tray down here, you have the option to either select the arrow and select an app that you may have in here, or you can also click on other system tray icons, and then you can have them show up by just turning them on. Now unfortunately, every time you install an application, it's not going to automatically turn on. You have to go in here and turn it on if it's an application you want to monitor down here. Let's close out of that. Another thing is that the light theme sometimes is a little blinding. So if you right click on the desktop and select personalize, then you can select colors and you can change your mode here from light to dark. You can also choose custom, which would mean that you can change up specific ones to be light, specific ones to be dark. I'm just going to leave it on dark here as I consider it more traditional Windows-like. And then I'm just going to hit the back button here. You can also change up your background. You can also apply pre-built themes here, which will also set it to dark mode or light mode. And you can see which ones are light and which ones are dark in this option here. Now the next portion of this video is once again completely optional. This is going to be fine-tuning things for better performance and, in my opinion, better stability of the operating system. So the first thing we're going to do is click on the start menu and type in control, and we're just going to select panel. And then I'm going to drop the category down to large icons. I'm going to maximize this. First up, let's go to power options. And you can feel free to change your power plan to whatever you want. I'm going to leave mine on balanced here. However, I'm going to click on change when the computer sleeps. Now, you can leave this as is. However, since I have a desktop here, I don't actually want it to go to sleep. So I'm going to drop this down to never. And then I'm going to leave the turn off the display as is. That's perfectly fine. Click save changes. And then next up, click on choose what the power buttons do. And what we want to change is turn fast startup off. The problem with fast startup is that when you shut your computer down, it's not actually shutting it down. It's more or less putting it into a hibernation or sleep state. And so if you have corruption of applications or something from your previous session, then they will bounce right back into your next session. So this really was a function that was meant to speed up mechanical hard drives, but since most machines these days have solid state drives, there's really no reason for this to be on. So let's click on change settings that are currently unavailable, and then untick this, and then in the bottom select save changes. We can close out of the control panel now. Now if you have a desktop, hibernation is eating up space on your machine, even if it's not a laptop. And one thing I can show you is if I click on File Explorer, click on this PC, note how there's 424 gigabytes of free space here. Now we can free up a little bit more if we select the start menu and we type in command and select command prompt. However, I'm actually going to select run as administrator for command prompt and select yes for the UAC prompt, and then type in power cfg/hibernate off. So we'll hit enter, and then we just regained some more disk space there. So that would have been just disk space that was completely unusable for the entire time of, say, having a desktop. If you have a laptop and you're actually expecting to have it hibernate, then you wouldn't do that. Worst case, if you wanted to, you can always turn it back on. I'm just going to use the up arrow to bring back what I had, and you can always just type in that command hibernate on and it would turn it back on. So it's no big deal to have it off. And I'll close out of this. One thing also just to show is we'll launch Edge, and then up in the top right corner is going to be your setting options, and then let's click on settings and then click on system and performance. And I like to turn off startup boost and continue running background extensions and apps when Microsoft Edge is closed. Now, of course, if you are not planning to use Edge, then this is all something you don't necessarily have to do, but this is my recommendation, and we can close out of Edge. So that's all you need to do to get Windows 11 Build 24H2 installed on your machine. Feel free to dabble with things and check out all the new features. If you found this video to be useful, please like it and subscribe to my channel to keep up with my latest happenings. I also invite you to check out my channel if you haven't seen it before, to take a look at all the different project videos that I show off and all the various tinkerings. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.